Welcome back to the South African Morning. Now, the first ever data-driven global drug policy analysis has been released. The Global Drug Policy Index looks at how drug policies measure up to UN requirements. South Africa scored 47 out of 100, and it's not alone. The index is showing that most countries around the world don't have policies that meet the UN's minimum requirements. Let's discuss this with the co-founder of the South African Drug Policy Initiative, Keith Scott. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Keith. And I think an important question is, where exactly is South Africa falling short when it comes to its drug policies?
Good morning, and to your listeners. Thanks for having me on the program. We're falling short in several categories. There are 5 main categories, and we do reasonably well in 1 or 2, but we fall short, especially on the human rights side of things, where we actually don't have a very good harm reduction approach to drug use. In other words, we don't look after people who use drugs, who are addicted to drugs for various reasons. So that's the one of the main reasons we fall down. The other one is that the availability of drugs for various use, for pain, medical uses, as well as for treating drug addiction. We're very poor in that regard. Where we do fairly well, but not 100%, 80%, compared to other countries, is that we don't generally have the extreme responses that some countries have, like the death penalty, life sentences, all sorts of extreme, disproportionate drug sentencing that some countries have. So we don't do too badly there. And so that's the main one. Those are the main points I'd like to make.
Dr. Keith, what about those standards? I mentioned them in my intro, that there are basic standards or recommendations that have been stipulated by the United Nations. What are some of those, just to get a better understanding of the standard in which most countries should be striving for when it comes to dealing with drug issues within a country?
Well, the standards, as I say, the measurements are 5 main categories. And that is the first one, they assess the use of extreme sentencing and responses, how good the country is or how bad they are. The second one is proportionality of criminal justice response. In other words, the sentencing compared to other offenses. In most countries, in fact, the sentencing for drug crimes is far out there. It's so disproportionate to other crimes. In other words, people can go to jail for many years for selling a small amount of drugs, which isn't really harming anybody, whereas compared to somebody, say a rape or something, they get a sentence of 1 or 2 years, or an extreme violent offense. So the disproportionality is pretty global, and South Africa's pretty bad at that. And one of the other aspects that we're not good at is actually militarizing the approach to controlling the drug trade. And in the Western Cape, we're actually particularly bad in that. We called in the army last year. It didn't make any difference to the drug trade. That is one. And then, as I mentioned before, health and harm reduction. Do we do enough to help people who are addicted to drugs because they just happen to be addicted? And the fifth one where we fail really badly is we don't have any development which we should have, say for cannabis, where we give farmers an alternative or give people alternative to growing a drug or trading in a drug.
Now, a big issue which has been mentioned in the report that was released is the fact that a lot of countries, and South Africa would be considered one of the more poorer countries compared to your Western ones, there isn't enough resources in terms of funding or ploughing into dealing with the various issues that you've mentioned. Resources, financing is still a big issue here.
Well, yes, that comes under the development too, that category. There's no almost no money going into the development of alternatives to the drug trade. And at the moment, we're in the middle of that with the cannabis bill that's going through Parliament. As we know, cannabis has been legalized by the courts in South Africa, the Constitutional Court, and Parliament is trying to formulate a bill which will include those development aspects. And it's interesting because we were involved as a South African Drug Policy Initiative. We made verbal and written submissions to Parliament, as did many other groups. And we have, on one side, we have the agricultural sector and even the ministry, which is desperate to legalize the widespread growth of cannabis for various reasons. And yet we don't have that option yet. And when you have the development like that, especially in relation to a particular drug like cannabis or, say, in South America, cocaine, one can use the money that the fiscus gets from that development to actually help people with drug addiction and problems and take the drug trade away from the criminal sector.
Very interesting insights there. Dr. Keith Scott is the co-founder of the South African Drug Policy Initiative, talking to us about the first ever accountability or policy test that's been done to monitor how countries across the world manage the drug issues. And of course, his final insights there indicating that funding and resources is one of the major barriers when it comes to dealing with the drug scourge.